thank you so much. I'm going to spend like 5 minutes talking about myself. I'm a philosopher. You're like, philosopher? What does a philosopher do? Philosophers teach. I think that's the main source of income for most philosophers. Some maybe are lucky enough to get paid for research and writing and stuff like that, which is something I also do. And thankfully, like Norwich University, which is like an hour and a half from here, I think. Has anybody been to Norwich University? Very cool. You saw lots of like people in uniforms marching around and doing stuff. Yeah, that's where I'm at. Pardon me?
My mom works with me.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so I work with your mom in some sense, right? There we go. So Norwich University thankfully gives me a lighter teaching load so I can do a little bit more research. And I'm going to talk about one of my research projects. But first, how did I get to this research project? I was a skateboarder growing up. Is there any skaters here? Give it to me. All very cool. Not that if you don't skate, you're not cool, but you know, I'm just saying. Maybe I'm biased. So I grew up as a skateboarder. Didn't do very well in high school because, of course, it's not very cool to do well in high school if you're a skateboarder. Although I guess that's changing now, at least for some kids. And then when I got to college, I was like, man, I don't know what's going on here because I'm interested in everything. So I had this horrible problem of like being into everything, but only a little bit. And then I realized, or I was convinced into believing, that philosophy was the best choice of study for someone who's into dabbling a little bit into everything. Okay, so that's kind of the direction that I went. I ended up getting a Ph.D. in philosophy at the University of Southern California. Super lucky getting in there. And then I got a job in Massachusetts teaching philosophy. I was there for 8 years, and then I jumped ship and moved to Norwich University. You might ask, what do philosophers really do? What does this have to do with science? Everything. And here's why. Because philosophers like created science. If you think back into history, you think of those like old scientists like Newton. What do they call themselves? Does anybody know? A natural philosopher. So there's a kind of a movement in philosophy to go back to something like that. And I'm interested in a project like that, but with contemporary topics, and also I'm not smart enough to study gravity and these other gnarly mathematical things. Any questions on what it's like to be a philosopher? I know you have a philosophy program here. Has anybody taken a philosophy class here? What'd you think? Interesting. Film criticism, I think, is one of the main emphasized kind of features. All right, very cool. I wish that I could teach film, but alas, I just teach other stuff. All right, well, should we get into this stuff? As you know, I'm a skateboarder. I do philosophy, and guess what? If you're a philosopher, you can study anything. So I'm like, let me study skateboarding. Skateboarding is a weird phenomenon, and I'm going to try to like show how weird it is. Okay, so not just like skateboarding in general, but Vermont skateboarders. Okay, so this is David Hebert. He is a Vermont skateboarder. He's in San Francisco, and he's living there right now. And a video just came out of him, and I don't know. Oh, it's not going to cooperate. Let's see. Anybody, can you help me with this? Wait, maybe it will cooperate. And I'm the one that's dysfunctional. Okay. There we go.
How's that? How'd I do?
You did excellent. Give this guy a hand. All right. He's really set this up. So this video came out a month ago. Okay, yeah, you can see it okay. David Hebert, Vermont skateboarder, skateboarding in San Francisco. He's a professional. I don't think you'll get sound, but I don't think you need it. Pretty cool. No, you don't have to hush. This is like, you should be cheering and freaking out. Yeah, like, whoa, dude, he's bombing this hill. It's insane. Yeah, he doesn't wear a helmet. Yeah. And you think, oh, this guy's going to the hospital. Nope, there he is. Bloody hand, no biggie, just part of what it means to be a skateboarder. I've watched that like a million times. All right, back to our normal show. Thank you for the gasps, right? It's absolutely horrifying to think, like, I'm like, what was going through his mind when he was like just straight bombing that hill? By the way, the skateboard he was riding, you can't really go over like 30, 35 miles an hour without getting these things called speed wobbles, which eject you from the skateboard almost automatically. I myself, for some reason, at like 20 miles an hour get ejected. So, but note, I don't wear a helmet. David Hebert doesn't wear a helmet. My children who skateboard don't wear a helmet. I think my wife wears a helmet on occasion, but not very frequently. She's in the audience somewhere. I'm waiting for her glare. Oh, there she is in the back. So you've got to ask yourself this question, right? What are these skateboarders thinking? All right? And we can divide that question up into a couple other questions. And I bet these are some of the questions you might have had. Is this skateboarder, David Hebert, irrational? Is he mentally unhealthy? Do skateboarders perceive helmet wearing costs, oh, this is very technical, as greater than the benefits? Like somehow wearing a helmet just costs more, maybe financially, maybe physically, maybe it's so uncomfortable, maybe socially, you get made fun of. And those downsides are so great that the benefit of protecting your brain, which is really where you are, is somehow outweighed. And then maybe skateboarders just don't think that helmets are going to protect them. Right? So these are some questions that I had. Any other questions more specific than just why do skateboarders not wear helmets? I'm working on this project. I don't have a very big imagination. Maybe you do. Just think about it. Put it in your back pocket. Think, is there like a better question than what Professor Glenney's asking? Because I bet there is. So I want to talk about 3 different features of skateboarding. Its context in extreme sport. I'll give a little pictorial history of skateboarding. And then I want to focus on this project that I've been working on. And of course, if you have questions, throw them my way. So let's talk about extreme sport. How many of you engage in one of these activities or more that could be defined as extreme sport? Is anybody willing to disclose what extreme sport you're into? Just scream it out. Snowboarding. What? That's incredible. Okay. What else? Waking up in the morning. On some definition. Kayaking. What else we got? Yeah?
I guess you can think of figure skating.
Figure skating. I can see how that could be extreme. We'll give a better definition of that. Does anybody do like the hang gliding wing stuff or parachute? No. Good. All right. That's pretty intense. We also got some diving. I didn't know that was perceived as an extreme sport, but a lot of people do. And as you can see, some of these extreme sports just have helmets on the icons. So it's not so surprising that a motorcyclist would have a helmet, right? But the skateboarder doesn't. The parkour in the second to the left top, they don't have a helmet. The BMXer doesn't have a helmet. I don't even know what this person is doing on the top right. Does anybody know? No helmet, slacklining. Thank you, rec department. Represent. Wait, do you slackline?
Not very well.
That means he does do it. Impressive. Whereas, surprisingly, bungee jumping doesn't use a helmet. Probably because it wouldn't really, rock climbing, no helmet. How many of you saw Free Solo? that doc on the guy, yeah. He didn't seem to wear a helmet. He did not, he seemed to be risk averse in the sense that he seemed very strangely safe about his practice, lots of practicing, lots of care, but at the same time, if he didn't do that, he probably wouldn't be a free solo climber for very long. Anyway, so here's a traditional way of thinking about extreme sport. It's risk-centric, and the participants are in many ways pathological. They're socially unacceptable in the sense that they're the kind of like social outcasts in general. They might have kind of some mental problems. And this is all based on the assumption that participation reflects some innate need for thrill, excitement, or adrenaline seeking, right? So they're adrenaline junkies. And I bet a lot of you could stereotype some of these extreme sport participants that way, right? So the free solo guy, you're like, wow, like what's going through his mind? He seems like he might be irrational. Given, and we'll get to the definition, but I'll give it to you in just a moment. One misstep and he's gone, right? That doesn't sound like a sport. You know, that sounds like death, like a kind of a form of suicide or something like this, right? So that's why a lot of practitioners that study extreme sport are very worried about the participants that engage in the activity, right? And there's all these different ways of thinking about. So sensation seeking is kind of the negative cast on what these extreme sport participants are about, whereas edge work is like, no, this is a positive thing. Like all humans should be seeking some degree of risk. That's where you really kind of wake up, right? And I bet a lot of you that do extreme sports are like, yeah, man, I feel so alive when I'm to some degree risking the possibility of death or injury or some such thing. There seems to be a certain kind of personality type that is aggressively seeking adrenaline rush. And there's been studies, like I know psychoanalysis is kind of out of favor, but in the 80s and 90s you saw a lot of people trying to understand extreme sport participants in that way. But this is the general stereotype, right? All right. There's another view that has recently come out. This is a 2018 paper where you're like, you know, we don't think these extreme sport participants are all that bad. In fact, they seem to be all good because they are trying to come to terms with their own existence in a deeper way than other human beings. And in coming to terms with their own existence, they are placing themselves in close proximity to a kind of set of environmental conditions that can cause them harm. But in so doing, they know their environmental conditions better than anyone else. So the free solo guy, does anybody know his name?
Alex Honnold.
Should I just call him Alex? Like I'm friends with Alex. Alex probably knows rocks better than you. In fact, if I recall in the documentary, he talked a lot about the different type of rocks, their gripability, their potential for flaking off, causing him to fall. And so when you form this close relationship with your environment, due to kind of the demands that you're going to place on the environment for you to continue to survive, it gives you a kind of way of exploring the world around you that permits you to understand yourself better than anyone else. So if I think about this guy, I don't know who he is, but my gosh, he's on another level, right? He has combined two extreme sports, we'll call it surfing and motocross, but he has created a new world for himself, right? And if you think about that vehicle, what does it weigh, like 100 pounds? And then with his body, it's like 300 pounds. So this 300-pound person has enough speed to negotiate a wave surface. It's incredible, right? You didn't think this was possible? It is possible. Why? Extreme sports. In particular, this extreme sport participant And humans that watch this and witness it, they're the better for it. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was possible. That's incredible. I like this view, but it's very new. Okay? We'll get back to it. We'll talk about it a little bit more with respect to skateboarding. But I think, even though I say it's very new, it might not be very new, because Thoreau may have held this view. He was, by all accounts, an extreme ice skater. He would go on the rivers as fast as he can, and I guess he was rather clumsy, which made it even more dangerous for him. But he thought that when he ice skated really fast, it was as if he could take on the persona of a bird, right? And the bird kind of just travels without, it like glides across the top of the water. And Thoreau kind of saw himself as engaged in that activity. Was there a question? Or are you just stretching your pencil? Okay, that's good. That's good. And the key here is he saw things differently when he was ice skating on the rivers than if he were, say, just walking. Okay? And by the way, we do know Thoreau was also very good at walking. He wrote a little essay called On Walking, right? I mean, this guy's an expert. So he knows walking really well. He knows ice skating really well. And he's like, guess what? Ice skating gives me a whole new world, a whole new vantage point to see reality. So I think that backs up this ecological view. There's this problem, though. We cannot deny that extreme sport has mortal danger attributed to it. So the agreed condition, even though we don't really know what extreme sport is, we could debate it, but man, you don't want to get into those waters, is that it involves potential death as a result of a misstep or accident while engaged in the activity. That's the defining feature of an extreme sport. And this is true for basically any way of looking at it, even ones that take risk as a good thing, like the ecological approach. So here's a little graph from that ecological view of extreme sports paper. And here in this circle, I know it's a little small for you to see, but it says possibility of death in case of accident. So that's part of the definition of extreme sport, even when placed in a positive viewpoint. And I think this one is the jumping off of cliffs and then having the wings carry you. And no surprise, it's high for that particular activity. All right. So, any questions so far? So I've defined extreme sport as, in some sense, resulting in death with a possible accident or misstep. You thought, no, maybe it was. Well done. This is an opportunity to criticize the speaker. Misnumbered slide. That's for all of you. Yes?
Hi, my name is Rachel.
Thank you.
Wouldn't somebody who does extreme sports, maybe their view on death is more accepting versus maybe somebody random day who maybe fears death, more people fear death than they don't.
So it could be that the personality type of an extreme sports participant includes the acceptance that death is a foregone conclusion. You just don't know when it's going to happen. Whereas a lot of us participate in a different reality of trying to avoid the thought of death. We don't think it's really going to happen, et cetera. So there could be this deep existentialism, right, that permeates their understanding of the world, makes them more likely. But when you talk to these extreme sport enthusiasts, and I guess I'm not talking about Alex, because he seems to be very unique. When we talk to skateboarders, I mean, I guess there's the phrase skate or die, but when you really push them, they're not like, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. That goes back to that risk question, I think. Whether or not we should see it, the risk, in the context of risk or in the context of existence. I think you're saying we can just combine those. Oh man, that's a really good idea. I don't have a slide for that. All right, well done. Should I jump to skateboarding?
Yes.
Just rolling along here. Thank you. That was a dad joke. Yeah. Shout out to all the dads. All right, so I'm going to take you on a tour of skateboarding. These are largely from the 60s. There's Clint Eastwood. Isn't that crazy? Right up there. Note it looks like a skateboard, right? So whatever was going on in the 60s seems to be similar or of the same kind as what's going on today. Here we have more in the 70s. You have a little bit more extreme participation, right? We've got vertical axes happening here with swimming pool skateboarding, and then vert ramp skateboarding, steeper banks maybe. I'm sorry, I just like looking at these photos. Then we have our glam 80s. Was anybody alive during that time? It was an amazing time to be alive. I had a subscription to like a heavy metal. Like it's not heavy metal. It was like glam rock, right? You had Poison and...
Did you have long hair too?
I did not because, yeah. I couldn't fully commit to the glam rock lifestyle, but I could appreciate it. Lots of day glow. It's as if it was just invented then. And the skateboarders were like, yes, this is our time. They seized upon the opportunity, and they have lots of like day glow. But you notice something else that they have. Helmets. Keeping it safe. I mean, like, what the heck's going on here? Look, just look at them and then look at them. When I look back on these photos, which changed my life in the sense that it got me into skateboarding, I'm horribly embarrassed as well. I'm just throwing that out there. I mean, look at what they look like. Like all padded up and anyway. All right, you can see I'm biasing you. I'm poisoning the well. Then we have late 80s, 90s skateboarding with Nodis and Gons and Ray Barbie. And note we're kind of moving away from what's going on there to here and then today. You know, this is like 30 years into the future. Notice how extreme things have gotten. What are you laughing at? What is it? Wait, this guy with the helmet?
Yeah. He looks like he's from a really bad music video.
Like YMCA? Yeah. What is he doing? Yeah, it looks like he's, is he a man or is he a ramp? Maybe he's a man ramp. Needless to say, things get more extreme. In the top right, we have Jaws ollieing a 25 stair. We've got, does anybody know this photo? It's a pretty famous photo. This is a stair set that's notorious. It's called El Toro. Here's the Hollywood 16. Here's some guy ollieing on a roof. Right, so things have gotten really extreme. But note, no safety gear here. And really, what's going on today, what's making skateboarders super cool today, again, is that stuff and this stuff. Lots of diversity, lots of inclusion. Lacey Baker has essentially, come out as gender non-binary. She's done some work with Miley Cyrus. You've got some transgender skateboarders. You've got a really big name skateboarder that came out as gay. And then you have young female skateboarders who are just destroying skateboard. I mean, destroying in the positive sense, of course. Making skateboarding really cool. The funniest thing, this is Sky Brown. She's, I think she's 12 in this photo. She has a sticker for ProTech, which is a famous helmet company, but not wearing a helmet. Why? Because you can't wear a helmet in skateboarding. You can't wear a helmet. Why is this? What's going on? Yeah,
I got a question to that. So,
give it to me.
so you can't wear a helmet in skateboarding. Well, like they did this in hockey, right? Though, like for the longest time, that was a huge thing. Where, you know, if you want to be a hockey player, you don't wear a helmet. But now, like, when do they make the transition?
Was that in the 70s?
I don't know exactly when it was. I think it was the late 80s, early 90s.
Wasn't it when a hockey went up goalie?
Yeah, when did they make it so that it was mandatory for? Yeah, that's what it was, right? Because they didn't have the.
I think it was early 80s.
Early 80s?
Early 80s.
NFL, it was in the mid 40s when they started requiring helmets. Think about that. So it does seem like sports have a natural evolution to adopting safety gear as they become more extreme, which makes skateboarding even more weird, right? We have lots of evolution, 60 years of evolution, and essentially a rejection of protection. Yeah.
What percentage of skateboard injuries are head, neck, or spine related compared to other types?
We will get there. That is the appropriate question to ask. So types of injuries becomes really a big question here. And then are they, not survivable or easily healed from, right? So you're essentially asking, is skateboarding even that dangerous? All right, that's good. So we're getting there almost right now. It's like we have the same mind or something. Okay, so here we go. I've been trying to hold off on this conversation. Why? Because it's boring and horrible to talk about. Only dads and moms talk about this with their children, right? Ugh, nobody wants to talk about it. But here we go. Here we go. This is one reason why it's cringy. We've got a headline from 2012. Tony Hawk, super famous. He decided to skate with his young daughter without a helmet, and the news media took notice, and they were just like, oh my gosh, he is totally irresponsible. Right? Also, another cringy part of skateboarding is this stuff. No disrespect, because I think I saw a couple longboards. There could be a longboarder in this audience right now. No disrespect, but kind of. The interesting thing about longboarding is that you can go at very fast speeds without getting those speed wobbles, meaning that wearing a helmet longboarding seems to be part of the required equipment, as opposed to skateboards, which again, at around 30, 35 miles an hour, you really can't continue on, right? You get ejected from your skateboard. So this gets back to this question, how risky really is skateboarding now? Maybe not as risky as we perceive it to be. Well, here's another case example of skateboarding being risky. This is a Vermont skateboarder, Dave Mull, and he has decided to jump onto a ledge. It's approximately 25 feet in the air and slide down it. This got a lot of media attention because, again, no helmet, right? Have you already accepted this as normal now? No gasps? All right. Maybe it should have been bigger on the screen. Okay, so here's kind of an answer to your question. This is from the Tony Hawk Foundation. And they do a good job of kind of just laying out in general what really is dangerous about skateboarding. And notice you only have about 2% of skateboarders end up in the emergency room each year. As a parent of 4 skateboarders, that's about right. We've gone to the emergency room 3 times, I think. Oh, wait, and then 3 times for me. So anyway, 80% of those injured are male, and about 60% of those injured are 15 years old or younger. About 20% are under 10. So you've got this pretty large curve happening in the teenage years, which is usually when people start skateboarding. So it could be that there's a graduated curve of learning and injury that can be associated. And in fact, that's largely the case. You got 1/3 of the injured are beginners. I just realized I have like a laser pointer on here. I'm going to use it. All right, 75% of injuries occur on the streets, 25% on skate parks. And as you saw in a lot of those photos, those are not in skate parks. Those are out in the streets. Has anybody seen skateboarders in the streets doing their thing? Yeah. Maybe a police officer there asking them to go away. Wait, did you say they're annoying? Wow. All right, respect. What is the basis of a lot of these injuries? A failed trick attempt, 26%, surface irregularities. In Burlington, that's got to be a little bit higher, I'm assuming. Loss of balance, much higher with me. But as you can see, in general, right, it seems to be not so much the danger of the thing that they're doing, but rather, with surface irregularities and loss of balance, accidental features that contribute to a lot of the injuries. And here we get to the types of injuries. Boy, you don't have much head injury at all. And in fact, I think we're limited to 9% contusions. That's a head injury. And then 3% concussions. Do we have a head on here? Concussion. Well, we've got our concussion. That's the only head. Yeah, okay, so this contusion would just be under the laceration fracture. Okay, so really low. And then, as you see, severity of injuries, the fatality is at 0%. In fact, there are a few fatalities that have occurred, and they usually are skateboarders getting hit by vehicles. As you saw with David Hebert, when you're bombing a hill, you run the risk of oncoming traffic, and that's actually a skateboarder passed away just over a year ago from that in San Francisco, a very famous hill bomber. All right, so how does this do for answering your questions in general about distribution of injuries? Pretty good, pretty good. Thank you, Tony Hawk Foundation. All right, so let's get back to thinking about a certain kind of risk that seems to be associated with the skateboarders. And this is Barris. He was skating toward an object, and he hit a crack. Upon hitting that crack, he was ejected from his board and landed with his head into the obstacle he was just about to skate. Accident, okay? It left him with a pretty severe contusion. TBI was the result as well. I think they removed the cranial cap for the swelling, et cetera, et cetera. Is it really gross for you guys to look at this picture? Or is that just me? Oh, okay. But here's his response. Always skateboard it like it's the last time you'll ever skateboard again, because you don't ever know when your time's up. That's how we effing skateboard. And then the response from the interviewer is, that's how we're going to keep doing it, man, no matter what happens to us. Yeah, so it could be that they are knowledgeable of death. They think about death. It really is like skate or die for them. Let's go back to our questions a little bit. How are you feeling about skateboarders right now? Irrational? Mentally unhealthy? Good, good. But you can also mitigate that by recognizing 0% fatalities. Very few head injuries. Most of the time, it has something to do with the extremities that get damaged. Yeah?
Melissa, I just have a question. Like, isn't it also true that certain helmets are actually similar to motorcycle riding, more dangerous? They can cause a fatality in the event of the way that a motorcycle crashes, or even a skateboard can really the way they walk.
Yeah, so
Different types of helmets.
So it could be that helmets become a greater risk of injury unto themselves. I did do some focus group interviews, and a couple of the skateboarders said that the helmet blocks their vision from up above, and then the straps become a distraction in their peripheral vision. Also, the bobbing up and down of the helmet, because it's not cool to strap on your helmet if you're a skateboarder, of course. So it has a little bit of bob, And that also was a distraction from them engaging in the trick. So again, you're right. But if you also recognize that they have the possibility of an accident hitting a crack, for instance, or a teeny little pebble, and go flying into an obstacle, a helmet could prevent a pretty serious head injury.
So then can I follow up with
Yeah.
that? Is there a specific helmet that would be safer than other helmets?
They do sell a variety of different helmets in skateboard shops. The most popular one is this one. It's super soft and cushy, and it's not certified. I once saw a skateboarder hit their head with it on, and it just cracked open, and they were still knocked out. So that non-certified one, which is the most popular one because it's so comfortable, correct. It might not do much good. In addition, in the 80s and 90s, oh man, I'm not going to say this live. I got insider information that an unnamed helmet company knew for a fact that it couldn't really prevent concussions and was poor at even preventing contusions because of the break rate. Anyway, but I don't want to get into that. Yeah.
Who's the certified body for?
It's what is it? It's AS.
ANSI.
Say it one more time.
ANSI?
Yeah, ANSI. They certify all sports helmets, and there are a lot of the foam core helmets that are in skateboarding, but they're not very popular because they're heavy and bulky, etc. Right? Okay. All right. So we're a little worried about the mental health of these skateboarders, perhaps. We do recognize that there's cost to wearing a helmet. Thank you for these additional discussion points. But we can also see that there's benefits to not wearing a helmet. Again, look how cool you look. All right? And there is this open question, which we haven't dealt with yet, which I'll get to from this study. Skateboarders, do they believe that helmets even protect them? All right. So here's something just from a general perspective, and then I'll get into this research that I did. The skateboarding risk that we've been talking about is paradoxical in the sense that it seems to be high-risk activity. You get significant injuries, and it's well known to participants. There's this thing called Hall of Meat, where almost on a daily basis you get a video of a skateboarder that has recently injured themselves and often has ended up in the emergency room. It's one of my favorite Instagram feeds, but anyway. So these are celebrated by the culture, but the financial and social benefits of engaging in this risk are pretty small by comparison. So how are we going to study this? I really like this idea of risk in skateboarding. I love it. Feels so authentic, right? They're just sending it for the sake of sending it, not for kind of financial benefit. A lot of them will never be known as skateboarders, right? You can only have 20 really well-known skateboarders. They're not even going for the fame. They're just doing it to do it. I respect that. I want to understand why. So I think that we have this opening question. That's what led me to studying helmets, right? That's why I think studying helmets might not be as cringy as one would think, because it actually gets at this really cool topic of skateboarding risk. So I think helmet neglect is an aspect of this kind of risk perversion in skateboarding. Again, it seems like the costs way outweigh the benefits. Here's a recapitulation of these injury data, and this is I think this is closer. This includes the car data, and a lot of these injuries in there's about 100 papers on skateboarding injury alone in these medical journals. They always say, hey, guess what? These injuries are largely preventable by wearing a helmet. Of course, a certified helmet. So again, helmet neglect seems like a good way to think about skateboarding risk, which seems perverse because the risk is much greater than the possible reward. Yeah?
Is this data in line with what you use, or is it contradictory?
Is it in line with what now?
The data you showed previously?
Yeah, the Tony Hawk stuff. It's pretty. So
75%
I know.
get head injury. We're only 3% of all injuries from concussion.
So these are, if you go to the hospital, you may be released and not go to the ER afterwards. Does that make sense? But if you go to the ER, 75% of those that go to the ER are because of head injury. That's how these journals describe the situation. It's a trick, almost, right? They make it, it seems like they're inflating the numbers. But if you have very low numbers of people going to these emergency rooms, it's not as big of a deal as it seems to be. By the way, a lot of these journals are saying things like, we have a public health emergency on our hands. Yes?
Les Kanat. I thought you said there were no fatalities in the previous data. Here we now
yeah.
the same data, now we have people dying.
Yes. Again, so this data from these journals is including the car getting hit by cars, whereas the Tony Hawk data just eliminated that altogether. So for students that are interested in this, we might have a bias from the Tony Hawk Foundation, no disrespect to the Tony Hawk Foundation. And if you look at this actual data, from these peer-reviewed journals, maybe there's something more significant happening here. I had another hand. Come on. No? No, are you sure? Because you could say something more about this data. What is it? Is it including longboarders? So we don't know. What kinds of skateboarding is actually being included in here? There's a lot of interesting stuff to think about when we're talking about injuries in skateboarding because these cast a very wide net, whereas the Tony Hawk Foundation, a much more narrow net, and it could be biased. Yes?
My name's Alex. Do you think that they underreport concussions in skateboarding? Do you think that most people who get concussions, like diagnosable concussions, actually go to the hospital?
So in this study that I will be talking about in a moment, thank you for allowing me to transition to it, a lot of the participants said that they didn't actually go to the hospital when they had their concussion. They thought they could deal with it themselves. So you're right. It could be that this data is greater. It just goes underreported because the participants don't want to go to the hospital. They don't think they need to. Do you see that with snowboarding? Yeah. So in a lot of extreme sports, the participants are very individualistic, agent-centered. They're not going to rely on, hospitals to help them. Maybe. All right. Okay, so here we go. I know. I always think of Aflac when I see this. So here's my hypothesis. I think that skateboarders themselves can identify a threshold calculus of helmet use at which their enjoyment of skateboarding is undermined by perceived risk of injury, mitigated by their high desire for sensation-seeking experiences, their self-efficacy, or their belief that they can avoid serious harm by rolling out of a fall or something like this, or avoiding an accident. They want peer approval, so they're not going to wear a helmet. And they want to be in the magazines. They want to be famous for their skateboarding, and you can't do that if you're wearing a helmet. And there might be some other social factors involved in there. But the idea is this. When I go to the skate park, I'm not wearing a helmet unless I'm in a big bowl and there's no one there. Then I'll put that helmet on, and I will skate with a helmet. Why? Because of this calculus that I use, suggesting that I'm a rational being, even though I'm a skateboarder who's perceived as reckless. Yes?
Hi, my name's Heather. So saying you're not going to wear a helmet because you think it's cool, isn't that like saying you're smoking or doing drugs because you think it's cool or socially acceptable? Like,
Totally.
That logic doesn't play out.
Well, I mean, it does in the sense that people smoke and do drugs because it's cool. It's a clear risk factor, right? But it might not make sense to you, but it is part of the calculus of decision making, right? Does that make sense? So you're like, yeah, morally, that's probably not a good basis for risking lung cancer, but it still is what happens, right? Okay. But I think that's a very good kind of cautionary tale there. All right, so here's what I did. I threw together a survey. It was online, and I threw it out to a bunch of participant skateboarders in Vermont. I got their demographics. I got how many times they were injured and how serious that injury was, their own perceptions of risk. Did they think skateboarding was really dangerous? Did they think that they could avoid falls? And did they wear helmets? 85 skateboarders, I felt pretty good about that, given the general low population of skateboarders in Vermont. There's other things that make Vermont a really cool place to study. You guys have lots of pro-helmet organizations. Has anybody heard of any of these? Has anybody heard of any other ones? There's many more for our little state of Vermont. Lots of incentives to wear your helmet. I think the bicycle benefits, if you have this little sticker in Burlington, you get 10% off your drink. Of course, you have to put the sticker on your helmet, right? I've audibly made fun of these people because I think I'm a bully. I'm a helmet bully. Yes?
I'm Caitlin.
Yes.
I was just wondering if when you took the data, did you compare what levels the skateboarders were on, how long they've been skateboarding or how good they are, how long they live?
I'm getting there in just a second. This is perfect. No, don't be sorry. You're essentially saying, Professor Glenney, you are on the right track, and that is what I need. Before I get there, though, there's another amazing reason to study helmet neglect in Vermont. Every skateboarder has gone through talent. By the way, this just came out. I was in the coffee shop this morning working on this PowerPoint slide, and here you have a story on talent, which is just starting up again. Hannah has a TBI. She's the owner, operator, and she has said that there's one aspect of the old talent that won't change. It closed down and it's opening up again. Because of her own experience with TBI, helmets will still be mandatory. So there's only one place that I wear a helmet, that's at Talent, and then alone in a big bowl. And if you talk to a lot of skateboarders, it really is Talent where they wear their helmet. If you think about that, that's a lot of incentive to wear a helmet because you've been trained to wear a helmet. You've done all your tricks in this helmet. It seems like you could easily take that helmet use, transfer it into the street. Question?
Brad Moskowitz. When you are alone in the bowl and you put on your helmet,
Yes.
are you more willing to try a trick that you might not know you can stick, or less willing than if there are people around?
I mean, I
And
think,
you're not wearing a helmet.
yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of variables in there, but when I consult my own awareness of my mental state, I'm a little bit more reckless maybe. I'll go for tricks that I wouldn't normally go for, but I'm probably more reckless because nobody's watching me. And for all in the audience that are judging me because I'm insecure, it's okay. I can deal with it.
It's
okay.
You're probably familiar with the idea of risk homeostasis.
Yeah. Give us a definition of this.
Sure. You have one acceptable level of risk, and when you add something that gives you a perception of safety, your level of risk will go up. For example, when you're skiing on the hill and you always wear a helmet, if you forget your helmet one day, you're probably going to ski a little bit slower.
Perfect. Well done, well done. And I think this is part of that risk calculus that skateboarders engage in when they think about whether or not to wear a helmet. It's a specific instance of it. Okay, so let's look at the data from this survey from 84 participants in the state of Vermont, or 85. Oh, I guess I did have an extra one. So most of them were white, male, from the US, over 25. More than half were over 25. 61% reported 11 or more years of experience skateboarding. We have like an aged population of skateboarders in Vermont. I think that's probably fits the general demographics of the state. And 51% are core skateboarders. They skate at least several times a week, if not daily. They saw themselves at the intermediate level, not sponsored skateboarders, but good enough to pull off significant tricks repeatedly. Yes?
Hi, I'm Rachel. Did you ask them how long they've been skateboarding? What age you started?
Yeah, I gave them essentially 0 to 25 plus years. And so they would mark the box that they fit. But yeah. Most of them preferred skate parks as well, rather than in the street. So think about that, right? We have got Talent Skate Park, where you're required to wear a helmet. There's also an outdoor skate park, or there's several outdoor skate parks where you're not required to wear a helmet. Yeah?
Grace McGee, where did you find the people for the study? Because if you found them all in the skate park, then that would definitely skew it.
That would definitely, that's very true. I did find them through the listserv of Talent Skate Park, right? Which requires helmets, and then also Maven Skate Shop, which is on Church Street, which a lot of the people that go there, it's a boutique, it's street style skateboarding. So both of I got essentially it promoted through both of those avenues, and that's it. Yeah.
Do you have a buffer if they say they're really good at skateboarding, but really they suck?
I know, dude. Well, I'm allowing... I'm allowing them to self-identify, as it were. I'm allowing them to report from their own view of themselves. That's a little bit risky, right? Yeah, no, I respect that. So we should be cautious. Maybe the statistics that we're going to get from this aren't going to be totally reliable because we're relying on a self-reported claim. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Would some of the statistics be because professionals or beginners, you would typically, you say you have 3 kids?
Yeah.
Did they start riding bikes when they were little?
Well, yeah. So they.
Put them in a helmet.
Yes, that's right. And even like scooting, right? They start in a helmet, and then in skateboarding, in skateboarding they start as a helmet largely because of talent. So then the question is, does this stick, right? Does that become part of the risk analysis, the risk calculus, I guess? So a lot of them had injuries, but most of them 3 or fewer. 7% said that these were from hitting their head, but none of them went to the hospital for this. So this relates to your question, right? They're going to hit their head. In the notes, it said, concussion, blah, 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 blah. Didn't go hospital, ha-ha. Of course, this is self-reporting, so they could be overstating their claims. What were their helmet attitudes like? They were pro-helmet. No surprise, right? We're in Vermont, lots of pro-helmet initiatives. They felt that skateboarding could lead to irreparable brain damage. I mean, a large percent. 80% reported thinking that those who choose to wear helmets are being safe and responsible. 90% reported believing that wearing a helmet can prevent a serious head injury from skateboarding. So that answers that last question. That's incredible. And a lot of these were very knowledgeable, and they were even individuals, perhaps, that purchased those non-certified helmets, but they still believed it could prevent a serious injury. Yeah?
Grace McGee again. Do you know what percentage of your report came from the Talent Skate Park versus the store?
I don't.
Okay. Because...
Wow. Another critical comment on my survey. Again, I am not insecure. Just fine. Yes?
I'm Elizabeth. Have you ever got to work closely with somebody who does create helmets for skateboarding or just in general and have gotten their opinion on what they can do to make it better or their experience?
Yes. This goes back to that insider knowledge I have about a helmet company in the 80s and 90s, knowingly selling helmets that were not actually going to protect the skateboarder. He didn't believe in helmet use. But that's just, I think, a separate issue. But it could make you think that these skateboarders are irrational for thinking that it could prevent a serious head injury. But they do. They're pro-helmet. They've believed the hype from Love Your Brain and all these wonderful nonprofits. They don't even think it's socially awkward to wear a helmet while snowboarding or while bike riding. 68.2% disagreed with the statement that wearing a helmet looks stupid regardless of the sport. I mean, phenomenal data, in my opinion. I was crying. I was so happy. I wasn't really crying. I was very happy. It seemed to suggest, like, hey, they're going to be pro helmets with skateboarding. Yeah.
Since you're interviewing people that are still alive, you could not have gotten data about your mentality.
True.
Did you ask them a question about whether they've had friends who've had serious head injuries or fatalities to account for dead people not taking surgery?
A very extreme question. Since there's so few skateboarders that have died from skateboarding, and there was one from Burlington, a longboarder, I think in 2011, who died, hit the back of his head while he was going down a hill. That's the only one I know and he was a student from out of state. So I'm not sure that would have sullied the data, but good question. By the way, your question does relate to CET studies in football, American football. I don't know if you know this, but they did a study on dead football players, carved up their brains, and realized that 98% had a significant, I think it's called CTE, extreme forms of CTE. And so that clearly probably clouded their data, their sample, because they were only sampling those that died at an early age, right? Good question? Yeah.
Well, I know you're talking about it's chronic traumatic encephalopathy,
Yeah.
right?
Wow, say that one more time.
Chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Encephaly.
Encephaly?
I think so.
Okay, I didn't know what the end was.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what is very common in football. And that's not just NFL professional, it's also college and then high school as well. They found minor CTE in a couple of the high school students that they did the autopsy of the brain. Yeah. So again, CTE studies are very important in football. Helmet discussion in football is very big. Here we are doing skateboarding. So again, here's just kind of like a bar graph of the reporting. So really, I think strong results, pro-helmet results here. For all extreme activities, you should wear a helmet. Look at that. The skateboarders, while they're taking this survey, are even like, yeah, when I skateboard, sometimes I think I could suffer irreparable brain damage, right? There's even other questions. Do you think irreparable brain damage would affect your parents negatively? It's like extremely high. Your friends negatively, extremely high. Your partner, if you have one, very, very high. Okay, so they recognize that irreparable brain damage is very bad for them. They say helmets are very good for them in preventing that. Well, you know what I'm setting up for, people. You know what I'm setting up for. For some reason, skateboarding risk prevails against the pro-helmet attitudes here in Vermont. Very little helmet use. This was reported in a variety of different ways. One of the ways that I tried to get this data, most of my friends routinely wear helmets when they skateboard, and look how low that is. Look how high it is, or how rarely their friends wear skateboards. I was, my gosh! Wait, should I just sit down for just a second here? Hi, how's it going? Okay. Very So, wow. Good data. So what we try to do is come up with like predictors, like what kind of people are those people that engage in helmet neglect in Vermont when they skateboard? Well, they usually have more than 1 year of experience. They skateboard a lot. They're core skateboarders. They have a perceived ability. They think that they're good. It's so reported, of course. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, my name is Tabitha.
Uh-huh.
I was wondering if you got any data on age on anything.
On age?
Yeah, because you said that you reported the ages
Yeah.
in your survey. But
Yeah, so I don't have that on these slides.
oh,
But I think the average, I reported earlier, the average age was
Over 25.
Over 25.
right. But
Yeah.
does that have anything to do with like those who live about?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, those, if the prevalent age is over 25, they're neglecting their helmets, 90% of them. Yeah, they're not wearing their helmet. And it's weird. You're like, 25, they're adults. You know, some of you even have PhDs. Not that I took the survey, but, you know. Here's the interesting thing. They actually believe that they can avoid a fall. If they hit a crack, if they get a teeny rock, if they get speed wobbles, they can avoid a fall in the way that would result in a brain injury. And here's the most significant feature. They identified with what's called the lifestyle of a skater. They're like, I'm a skater. So with these, that's kind of a boring slide. Here's back to our Aflac duck. Here's kind of my hypothesis stated more specifically given what we now got from the survey. They have a really high self-efficacy or belief in one's ability to avoid harm. They have a high desire for rewards of perceived peer approval and a high desire for social identity, again, only when it comes to skateboarding. The most significant predictor of helmet neglect was, wait, where are you? Was perceived risk. They really didn't think that the activities that they were engaged in were very significant. Significant in terms of risk or possible harm to their body, significant brain injury. All right, it seems like I'm just repeating myself, but I'm not. But maybe I am. Sorry, because maybe I am reporting. Okay, so here's a summary conclusion. I got like 4 or 5 more slides, hoping for more discussion, because I've been working more on this. So skateboarders, we think, in sum, mitigate their risk and safety choices as follows. Their enjoyment of skateboarding is undermined by an injury risk calculus and related social stigma calculus. Injury risk seems largely determined by perceived risk of injury, mitigated by self-efficacy. Again, their ability to avoid a major injury if they fall, or to avoid the fall altogether. There's the second stigma calculus is also at work. The rewards of perceived peer approval are mitigated by a loss of social identity that's partially determined by social risks associated with helmet use. So think about it. If I'm at the skate park, guess what's a guaranteed risk to wearing a helmet? None of the other skaters will like me. It sounds so funny, but for someone who's not insecure like myself, it's a big deal. So that's a huge, and plus, I've been skating for 30 years. I'm not going to fall today. I haven't fallen and had a serious injury in the previous 30 years. So part of the calculus is the longevity with which they've skated. And again, these are 25-plus-year-olds who've skated for a very long time and have only had 3 or less injuries in general. when we look at the mental states of skateboarders, in particular skateboarding risk, we can say that they have elevated adolescent propensity for peer-influenced risk-taking. They believe that they're not going to fall in a way that will result in serious injury. And there's this weird move that a lot of these folks make, loss aversion in decision making. In other words, does anybody know what that means, by the way? It's an interesting term, loss aversion in decision making. Any thoughts on what that could mean? Come on, professor. Help out the homie. When you make a decision, the thing that you know will be lost, such as your peer acceptance, is something that you're going to pay more attention to than something that you might not lose, namely your ability to cognitively function. And so when you're engaged in decision-making process with respect to wearing a helmet, and you know for a fact people are going to make fun of you if you wear a helmet, or ask you questions, or treat you slightly differently socially, you're not going to wear a helmet, even though you perceive that the helmet would protect you from a serious head injury. All right, so we can make some quick answers to these questions. I don't think skateboarders are irrational or mentally unhealthy because of their helmet neglect. They have a calculus, right? They're thinking through this stuff. Do skateboarders perceive helmet wearing costs as greater than the benefits? I think so. Again, they're totally pro-helmet, except for when it comes to skateboarding. They don't think it's a very risky endeavor for them, given their amount of experience. And of course, you've got these social costs if you wear a helmet. Do skateboarders not believe helmets protect? No, they do believe that they protect. All right, done. This gets back to maybe a new way of thinking about skateboarding risk. Back to that extreme sport ecological view. I'll quote from this essay, but I'll insert skateboarding instead of extreme sport. A more nuanced and comprehensive understanding of skateboarding has the potential to act as a facilitator to a deep positive understanding of self and its place in relation to the environment. Guess what skateboarders know really, really well? Everything about them. When a skateboarder goes to the skate park and there's teeny pebbles that can possibly cause an accident, they can see them and they pick them up and take them off. It's like they're pigeons or something. They can see these teeny little objects, not as food, but as predators in some sense. Did I really say that? Yes. In addition, they know their bodies very well. They know how to fall in a way that doesn't lead to serious injury. If that's the case, it seems like they have a better attunement or knowledge of who they are as physical beings in the world around them. That's a positive. And so it could be that new work on this ecological definition of extreme sport can do a better job of understanding skateboarding risk than the thinking of skateboarding risk in the negative sense, as it's been traditionally viewed. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Any questions to crush my spirit one last time? In the back, okay.
So, my name is Jess. I'm really fascinated about how skateboarders talk about snowboarding and that they're totally okay with wearing helmets snowboarding, even though it's kind of like the winter version of skateboarding. Did you specifically ask if they snowboarded and whether they wore helmets while they were snowboarding?
The only thing I asked them were, do they think that snowboarders who wore helmets were safe, were being safe, and was that good? And they affirmed that. That's it. It is weird that snowboarders wear helmets, don't you think?
Well, so my other question, kind of to add on to that, is, you're talking about this new skate park or this revamped skate park where they're forced to wear helmets. How many snowboarders possibly come from
So that's what I thought would follow with this study. Well, I didn't really think it because I'm a skateboarder, but if you're trained to ski and snowboard with a helmet on, when you're not in the training scenario and you're out on the mountain by yourself, you're still wearing your helmet. In skateboarding, that's not what happens. You are trained at this little skate park, indoor skate park, and of course in Vermont, it's cold for 6 months, so you can only be there. Everybody's there wearing their helmet. Then when it's summer and they go into the streets, no helmet. So it just doesn't follow, and that suggests there's something different about the risk understanding of skateboarding and snowboarding. Do you know what that could be? Remember I said like longboarders can go super fast?
Yeah, I think it works in tandem with like socially acceptable, but also like the risk really isn't as great as these other sports because of the velocity of
Well, I mean, I think snowboarding is more risky because of trees, because of other snowboarders and skiers, such that head injury is more prevalent, perhaps. Plus, the Love Your Brain Foundation, right? You had a professional skateboarder have a serious injury, head injury, and then became an advocate for wearing helmets. And that decreased the social stigma around helmets in snowboarding. Thanks for that great question. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Heather. Do you think your bias against helmets had anything to do with your results?
I thank you for that question. I had 4 other people working with me on the study. I was just the primary investigator. I didn't dirty my hands in the survey or in the statistics. Those were done by individuals from UVM. So I knew my bias, right? So I let them take care of the data. Though, of course, in my discussion of the data, perhaps bias, yes. Thank you for another criticism of my work.
Thank you again.
Yeah.